Tell me if you got it in yours.
Does it come up immediately? Good evening, everyone. Just give me one more moment. Yeah, $1. Got it. Came in. We are starting the 4th chapter of Mishlei. What we've seen up until now is Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, giving us a lot of detailed advice as to how we can use wisdom as not just a means of understanding the world, nature, but really as a way of thinking more deeply about our development, our personal development, our character development. And what he does in this chapter is spend a lot of time trying to reinforce what the function of wisdom is. Now, it's interesting. If you are a student and you're currently enrolled in a university and college, or any university around the world, you'll find that most of the instruction that you're going to be receiving is about how you can make a lot of money. What's your career going to be? How do you invest in making the right intellectual choices to help you get the best possible jobs? But this was not the case not too long ago. It was in the year 1840 when actually 1839 when the Industrial Revolution completely changed the world. And there was a major shift that happened later in the 1860s when we had children taking the jobs from adults in the factories, and they had at least the United States and many other countries had this major dilemma. How do we keep kids out of the factories so we could have the adults making some money? So they said, we'll create an education system. But the education system that they created wasn't a system to help develop the individual. The system that was created was to help take kids out of the factories, train them so that they could go back into the factories and comply with the regulations of factory workers. Now, if you were a student at Yale, Harvard, Princeton, or any of the Ivy Leagues, Oxford, or Al-Azhar University in Egypt, which is the oldest functioning university in the world, it's 1,200 years old. It was opened by a Rabbi Eliezer, who started a school in Egypt for everybody, higher level of learning. And in all those, if you wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, you couldn't find those majors in those institutions. So if you were interested in being an accountant, if you wanted to be a dentist, or whatever the profession was, you couldn't get a degree in those fields, those respective fields, by going to college. If you want to become a doctor, you apprenticed by a doctor. Now, suppose for a moment you were the doctor. Why would I was the apprentice asking you for this position in apprenticeship? Why would you give me that chance? Why would you give me an opportunity to apprentice with you? And the answer is, a lot of people are asking, but what makes me uniquely different is that I went to Harvard. I went to Yale. Those were, or Princeton, or any of the Ivy Leagues back then. There were only 4 or 5 schools in the country at the time. And they only offered 2 majors. You could either major in theology or divinity, or philosophy, and it was the philosophy of morality, and divinity was all about studying the Bible so that you could become a greater human being. The function of education, even in the West, was always about this deeper understanding and appreciation that the function of education is to develop a greater sense of self. How do I become a greater human being? How do I refine my character traits? This is something that the whole world knew, but we've lost our way in the last 170 years. And education today is all about, how do I make some money? How do I earn a living? Now, it's interesting. You're adults, you're watching this, and we never took classes and courses in parenting. There were no educational classes on how to keep a happy, healthy relationship going with your spouse. There was no conversation about, well, what are the responsibilities we have to society? The assumption is that you'll figure that out as you go along. But I took detailed classes in biology, and I could talk to you about the cell structure and how the heart functions or the anatomy of a rose. But I knew nothing as a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old about how do I build a relationship that's meaningful? How do I become a father and raise a family? And so much of that inner work that we're meant to spend time with, and on a very high academic level, we leave to chance, we leave to circumstance, we'll figure it out later, and all too often we make way too many mistakes along the way. And I believe that this idea that the function of wisdom isn't just it's funny, we have to speak about it this way, but even King Solomon, who wrote this about 2,800 years ago, he basically makes he's making the same exact claim. He says, think about it like this. If you are someone who's just pursuing wisdom for the sake of wisdom, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, because wisdom is not just having smart things to say. The function of true wisdom, of deep wisdom, is for the wisdom to flow through your veins. It's meant to go ahead and impact your character. It's meant to help you get a deeper understanding of yourself, a broader or more expansive view of the world around you. And instead, what ends up happening is that we live in this society, and he spoke about this again. This was an issue way back when as well, that most people thought the whole function of the world around them was just to care for themselves. It was a very hedonistic world. And whatever gains we made throughout society over the last 300-400 years with the intellectual revolution, the Renaissance that we went through, it's kind of come to an end. And we've created a society that taps into our most deepest, basic, animalistic instinct, which is just worry about yourself and nothing else. It's funny. There was if anyone wants this, I'll send it to you. It's fascinating. There was a link, there was a web page that was made that tries to explain to you the amount of money that billionaires have. So, it's got a graph. You're on your phone and you're flipping through, this money, and it's trying to allow you to have a visual aid to understand what Jeff Bezos's $200 billion means. Okay, so you're on your phone and you see what $1 million is, and you see what 10 million, and then you get to Jeff Bezos, and you're literally spending 3 or 4 minutes just scrolling. And they have these very cute captions along the way to grab your attention. I'll post it in the group before we end. You just keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and your mind can't even conceptualize how much money $200 billion is. And the question that this website leaves you with is, should anyone have access to that kind of money? Is there something wrong with a capitalistic society that allows, this is crazy, 400 individuals, the wealthiest people in this country, control 60% of all wealth in America. That's it. 400 people control 60% of all the wealth in this country. That's an insane number. And so we talk about, income gaps. We talk about this idea of there being a gap between the super rich and the poor, and with inflation and everything else happening right now, the gap's becoming wider and wider. Now, from a capitalistic perspective, well, what are they doing wrong? What's Jeff Bezos doing wrong? The guy's making money. That's the job. I remember growing up, there was a T-shirt that my friend got me. It said, the winner is the guy with the most toys, right? The winner is the guy that has the most stuff. That is what capitalism is. It's about creating a society, a competitive society, which is based on truth, because you have to have a system that's open. But it's all about how much money you earn. And that's how we define success. But clearly, that's not a good metric for success, because when you look at this country, we've spoken about this before, suicide rates are up. In the last 2 days, there were a whole bunch of suicides in New York City. There were horrible, sad stories of people writing letters of a young woman who, and a young man, it's horrible stories. They're young people with so much potential, but the pandemic has created a reality where people can no longer or have never really been trained to see beyond a life of career. Their careers define their identity. And you and I both know that if that is what you're living for, you're in trouble. Because there's so much more to life than the amount of money you're making and the things that you call your job. There's something else. There's something called the book of you. And King Solomon says, don't forget the mitzvot, the commandments that God gave you, that he put on our hearts. Right? He says, because these commandments, they add length of days and years of life and peace to you, because it helps balance you and ground you. These are beautiful principles, because the Torah itself, while yes, you can use Torah as a system to ingratiate yourself and make a just remember that as you're going out into the world and you're getting a career, remember that those things don't define you. That is a part of you. And I tell this to my kids all the time, and I'm sharing with you now, that the function of a career is so that you can make money to invest in the book of you. The function of a home, financial success is all there so that you could invest that into yourselves. How are you investing in creating the best version of you? You might think for a moment that it's the money in the account. That's success, but it's not. It's just a vehicle. It's a means to getting to spending time and investing in yourself. But it's so easy to get lost in that very basic hedonistic view of reality. Now, when we talk about success, right? How are we defining success? What is this a metric that we're using? So he says, "Chesed ve'emet al yazvecha ksharim al gagorotecha." Right? He says that kindness and truth should not leave you. Right? He says, bind them on your neck, inscribe them on the tablet of your heart. And there, you'll find favor and understanding in the sights of God and man. Right? The function of our personal development is so that we could become individuals and inspire humanity. That's what I want. I want to live a life where I am living a life of the best version of me. The best version of me is not Jeff Bezos. Now, I don't know what he does with his philanthropy. I don't know what he's doing with his money. I don't know him. But if he is the guy who is just making money for the sake of money, and every penny he makes is just another way so he could make another opportunity to make more money, without a vision of giving that money back to empower society around him to elevate themselves, if that is in fact what's happening, then we can't make an argument that today capitalism on some level is broken. Now you may be wondering, well, what is the Jewish system for financial governance? Because it's true that Judaism does have its own monetary system, and it's not a complete capitalistic one. It is a hybrid of a socialist capitalistic one, where you do have this ability to free rein markets, do what you want to do, but at the same time, every 50 years, all real estate transactions end up reverting back to its original owners. Right? Well, how does that work? Well, there's actually a very interesting economic article that describes the downfall of a society that whose majority of the wealth is generated through rentals, through real estate transactions. And we're seeing that today, that most of the successful, wealthy people around us, their major wealth is coming through real estate. And the problem with real estate wealth is that you're not really creating anything new. It's the same stuff. Yeah, at some point, you'll keep creating new buildings, but at some point you don't need it anymore. And if that's all you're creating, you're no longer being innovative. And the Torah wants you to be innovative, so it understands the real estate trap. That eventually, they say buy land because they stop making it. So buy as much as you can, and you're. What's that? Oh yeah, you look at Dubai. Rabbi Fari's over here because I have the pleasure of him listening to my class. So Dubai is a great example, right, of a whole entire
making land.
Well, that's true. You're making land over there. That's true. You get to the ocean and so on and so forth. The truth is, I'm not sure if you know this, but if you've been to New York City and you were ever spent some time in Battery Park was man-made land. Actually, it was an old landfill from the Empire State Building they dumped into the west-south river, and that area eventually became landmass that we use today. We built on it. The museum's there, the Museum of Tolerance is there. That whole thing was all man-made, that whole area. Anyway, Kitzur is that wealth is something that is important, but it can't come at the expense of us losing the opportunity of understanding ourselves. If you want to understand where so much of the challenge, of the frustration, of the hurt, the pain that so many people are going through right now, we're in pandemic. Okay, let's pause for a moment. It's 2020. Okay, we're almost at 2021. We just went through Operation Warp Speed, and we came out with this very cool vaccine that edits our genes to recognize the unique structure of this virus and give the body the tools to combat it. Okay, amazing. We have more access to information than any other time in history. We're living in a world called of AG after Google. Everything is there. We can learn anything at any point. We're ready, right? We should have access to understanding what it means to be happier today, more so than any other time in history, right? But what ends up happening is that we see the opposite is true. We see that we are living at a time in history where people are unhappy, where people are making money, but yet somehow disillusioned from what it means to truly enjoy the world that we're living in. We are living in a world of abundance, a world where every one of our basic needs are cared for. Instantaneously, you're hungry, I could push a button on my phone and some guy will deliver sushi to my door within 20 minutes. That's insane, right? Can you imagine that you lived in a world where you were hungry? Imagine going back in history and telling someone, one of your great-grandparents, that, hey, I live in a world where if I'm hungry, I lift a little brick out of my pocket, I push it, and some guy comes to my door with a smile and says, your food is ready. That's insane. That's insane, right? So how come, why is it that we're so far removed from just feeling this great sense of appreciation and awe? And King Solomon, again, he's admonishing us over here. He's saying, if you want to find happiness, if you want to find greatness, if you want to find excellence, then the way in which you're able to do this is by trusting in God. So he says, Shmi b'ni musar av. Listen to the discipline of your father. He's talking about the Torah. Right? Hikshila dat bina, and listen to know understanding. What are you doing to appreciate, understand the world that we live in? For I gave you good teachings. Don't forsake my instructions. That's the Torah. The commandments are not there to impose restrictions on you. Okay? The commandments in the Torah are not there to limit you. The commandments in the Torah are there to help give you the guidelines necessary to live a life of meaning, to make sure that your life is not lost in a world and in pursuit of just monetary success. Have that success. Make the money, again. Get the education. But not at the expense of losing what it means to be you. Ki ben hayiti la'avi rach v'yachid lifnei imi. I was a son to my father, a tender one, and an only one before my mother. V'yareni v'yomer li, and my dad instructed me and said to me, may your heart draw near to my words, keep my commandments and live, right? How do you live life of meaning? You live a life of meaning by creating boundaries, okay? If, some of you have children, some of you don't have children yet, but we all know that if you gave a 3-year-old everything he or she wanted, we would be destroying that child forever. It's clear that as young children need boundaries to find success. And the same is true for young, aspiring adults like ourselves here tonight. Every single person here needs to have some boundary in their lives. We can't do whatever we want whenever we want. Okay? And therefore, the Torah itself, its system of wisdom, its system of commands are there to help create that boundary for you. And then he implores us, Knei chokhmah, knei binah, acquire wisdom, acquire understanding. Al tishkach v'al tet miripi, and don't forget, don't turn away from my words of my mouth. Al ta'azov tishmecha ovecha titzerecha, don't forsake her, and she'll preserve you. Love her, and she'll guard you. Reishit chochma kinei chochma. The beginning of wisdom is to acquire wisdom. Ubechol kinyecha kinei bina, and with all your passion acquire understanding. Salea teromeka v'techbod tachbikchena, search for her, and she will exalt you, she will honor you and embrace you. Titin l'roshecha levayit chen. She will give your head a wreath of grace, and she'll transmit to you a crown of glory. Right? V'shema beni v'kach amrai, my son, listen deeply to my words. V'yirbu lecha shanot chayim, and years of life will increase for you. V'derech chochma toratecha hidrakicha mamagva yesher. In the way of wisdom I instruct you, I led you in the path of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be straightened, and when you run, you won't stumble. Take fast hold of this discipline. Don't let it loose, for it is your life. King Solomon is saying the following. What is the Jewish secret to major success and happiness? It's the pursuit of wisdom. What kind of wisdom are we speaking about over here? It's not astrology. It's not biology. Those things are important, yes, and we should strive to understand those things. But what King Solomon is trying to impart to us is this notion that there's this inner bina, deep understanding of what it means to be me. Musar is the spiritual character development of myself. And therefore, as we're preparing to switch calendars and go into the new year, and we're going to try to make these New Year resolutions for 2021, the one that we should all be making is, well, what does it mean to be me? How am I using my money, Jeff Bezos, to become a greater human being? To become a person that is more sensitive and aware to the wants and the needs of the people around me? How am I making society a better place? How am I giving back to the community so that those people that are left behind have the ability of moving up? How do I elevate the people around me? So the simple way we do this, by the way, is by becoming better versions of us. Imagine what we would do to the world around us if we just became people that were more in sync with the world around us, that we became more sensitive, that we were more compassionate, that we were more understanding, that we were more giving, that we were more loving, that we were able to let go of our own biases that hold us back. What would the world look like with just a handful of people making those little butterfly effect changes around the world? Together we could change the world. And King Solomon, this is what he wanted. The wisdom of King Solomon, and this is the ancient idea from modern times, is that true success comes from the inner work that we do, not the outer work that we do. Your careers are the outer work that we do, the inner work that we do. The parts of us that are, when we're alone, that we know who we are, when we're quiet and we're alone and there's no one there, and you think to yourself and that and it's, you know who you are and no one else really knows who you are, that's the part that you want to elevate. That's the part of you that will ensure that you have a life of meaning, of happiness and success. That's the part of you that will help you cling to life when things are difficult through a pandemic, when we're living through the most time, a world of so much abundance and so much wealth. There should be no depression today. There should be no unhappiness. There should be no anxiety today. It's all there. Everything is there at your fingertips. So how do we lose ourselves to the world around us? We lose ourselves because we don't develop the muscle of what it means to be me. If being me is dependent on external things, I failed at being me. Being me should be independent of everything else around me. I should not have to rely on anything and anyone but me. God, and God willing, your spouses, right? That is what it means to live a life of love and happiness, to live a life of growth. And King Solomon tells us, he says, pursue wisdom and knowledge. The wisdom and knowledge he's referring to is the wisdom of knowledge of elevating the self. That is the wisdom and knowledge that will lead you to the life of happiness and meaning that we also desperately want. I'm going to end it here. I think that's a good place to stop. God willing, next Monday we will pick it up again. I look forward to seeing all of you same place, same time. If anyone has any questions, I'll take it now. I will post before I forget, that link. It's totally worth taking a look at this. This is like so much fun. I sent this to my immediate family, and they loved it. Kiva, my son, he only wrote one word to express his excitement or surprise. He just wrote crazy. And if he writes that, then it's really crazy. That's the link. I put it in the chat. If you are watching this and you can't find it, just private message me. I'm happy to send it to you. Thank you all for listening. I am wishing you all a Laila Tov, a great night, and a Shana Tova Metuka. Happy New Year to everybody. Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Rabbi. See you in 2021.
My pleasure. 2021, that's right.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening.
You know what's really interesting, Rabbi? That
Sure.
I watched the recent Wonder Woman movie.
Yeah.
And it kind of touches upon all of this in the movie.
Wonder Woman touches upon King Solomon?
Well, the factor of the idea of abundance on people.
Oh, really?
Corrupt someone.
Oh, for sure.
Just saying.
Interesting. All right, cool.
Who saves the day but our own Israeli chick, right?
Was it a good movie at the end?
I think the first movie was better.
Right.
Personally, I think they try to put way too much into 2.5 hours. You know, all glitz and glam, but.
Got it. All righty. Thanks, Alana. Have a good night. Have a good night, everybody. Laila Tov.
Thank you.
Pleasure.